Hey there. Welcome to After Dark Horrors. I'm here to help you relax tonight. Though, before you get too cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It really makes us feel like the global community at Island. I hope you'll give this video a chance because I truly believe you won't find stories quite like these anywhere else. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's begin our evening together. Marcus Delacroix had never been afraid of isolation. After 15 years maintaining lighthouses along the rugged Maine coast, he'd grown accustomed to the solitude that came with decommissioned towers and automated systems. When the Maritime Authority assigned him to oversee the final shutdown of Beacon Point Light, he expected nothing more than routine paperwork and equipment removal. The lighthouse had been operational for over a century before being decommissioned in June. The automated LED beacon had been disconnected, the power lines cut, and all electrical systems shut down permanently. Marcus arrived in September with a simple mandate: catalog the remaining equipment, ensure the structure was secure, and prepare a final report for historical preservation. Beacon Point Light stood 67 feet tall on a rocky outcrop 3 miles from the nearest town of Harwick. The keeper's quarters, attached to the base of the tower, had been converted into a temporary office space for Marcus to complete his work. The autumn weather was already turning harsh, with Atlantic storms battering the coast nightly. For the first 2 weeks, everything proceeded normally. Marcus cataloged maritime equipment, photographed the lens array, and documented the lighthouse's condition. The silence was profound. No hum of electrical systems, no automated foghorn, just the constant rhythm of waves against granite. Then came the night of October 3rd. Marcus was reviewing maintenance logs in the keeper's quarters when a brilliant white light suddenly flooded through the windows. His heart jumped as he looked up to see the lighthouse beacon blazing at full intensity, its beams sweeping across the dark ocean in the familiar 4-second rotation pattern. Grabbing his flashlight, he rushed outside and stared up at the tower. The beacon was unmistakably active, casting its powerful beam across the water just as it had for decades before decommissioning. But that was impossible. He had personally verified that all electrical connections had been severed. Marcus climbed the spiral stairs to the lamp room. The heavy door at the top was locked, just as he'd left it. But through the thick glass, he could see the LED array blazing. His hands shook as he fumbled with the keys. When he finally got the door open, he was nearly blinded by the intensity of the light. The control panel showed no signs of power. Every switch was in the off position, every indicator light dark. Yet the beacon continued its relentless sweep, the massive lens assembly rotating with mechanical precision. Marcus frantically checked for hidden power sources, backup generators, anything that could explain what he was seeing. Nothing. After 20 minutes of frantic investigation, the lights simply went out. The lamp room plunged into darkness, leaving only the sound of his labored breathing and the distant crash of waves below. Marcus stood in the blackness for several minutes, waiting for his eyes to adjust, trying to process what had just happened. He checked his watch. 3:47 a.m. The light had operated for exactly 30 minutes. The next morning, Marcus called the Maritime Authority office in Portland. He spoke with Director Sarah Chen, who had overseen the decommissioning process personally. "That's impossible, Marcus," she said, her voice crackling through the poor cell connection. "I supervised the electrical disconnect myself. There's no power source connected to that lighthouse." "I know what I saw, Sarah. The beacon was operational from approximately 3:17 to 3:47 a.m. A long pause. Could it have been a reflection? Maybe headlights from the coastal road, or another vessel's searchlight. Marcus looked out at the isolated landscape surrounding Beacon Point. The nearest road was 2 miles away, blocked by dense forest. No ships had been visible on the horizon. "No, Sarah. This was the actual beacon. full power, standard rotation pattern. I'll send Tom Richards out tomorrow to double-check the electrical systems. Maybe we missed a backup power feed. Tom Richards arrived the next afternoon with a full electrical toolkit. He was a veteran electrician who had worked on lighthouse systems for over 20 years. Together, he and Marcus spent 3 hours tracing every wire, checking every connection point, and examining the power infrastructure. "Marcus, there's no way this light could operate," Tom concluded, coiling up his equipment. The main power lines were physically cut and removed. The backup generator was disconnected and removed. There's literally no electrical source capable of powering that beacon. "But I saw it, Tom. 30 minutes of full operation." Tom shrugged. "Maybe you dozed off and dreamed it? These old lighthouses can play tricks on your mind, especially when you're working alone." That night, Marcus positioned himself in the keeper's quarters with a clear view of the tower. He had his camera ready, determined to document whatever happened. At 3:15 a.m., he was fully alert, staring up at the dark lamp room. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the beacon blazed to life. This time, Marcus was ready. He snapped dozens of photographs as the brilliant beam swept across the ocean. The light was absolutely real. It illuminated the rocky coastline, sent shadows dancing across the keeper's quarters, and reflected off the water with the same intensity he remembered from the lighthouse's operational days. For 30 minutes, the beacon operated with mechanical perfection. Then, at 3:47 a.m., it went dark. Marcus examined the digital photographs on his camera's screen. Every single image showed nothing but darkness. Even with the powerful beacon blazing in front of him, his camera had captured only empty blackness. He called Tom Richards first thing in the morning. "I don't care what your camera shows," Marcus said. "The light was operating. I watched it for 30 minutes. "Marcus, listen to yourself. You're claiming a lighthouse with no power sources operating on its own, and your photographs show nothing. Maybe you should take a few days off." "I'm not imagining this." "Then set up a video camera. If this is really happening, document it properly." That afternoon, Marcus drove to Harwick and purchased a digital video camera with night vision capability. He set it up on a tripod in the keeper's quarters, aimed directly at the lighthouse tower. If the beacon activated again, he would have undeniable proof. At 3:17 a.m. on October 6th, the beacon blazed to life exactly as before. Marcus watched through the video camera's viewfinder, seeing the brilliant light sweep across the landscape in perfect detail. The camera was recording everything. After 30 minutes, the light went dark. Marcus immediately reviewed the footage, fast-forwarding through the hours of recording. The video showed nothing but a dark lighthouse tower. Despite witnessing the beacon's operation through the camera's own viewfinder, the recording captured only darkness. Marcus stared at the blank footage in disbelief. He was certain of what he had seen. The light had been real, powerful enough to illuminate the entire area. Yet every attempt to document it failed completely. Over the following nights, the pattern continued with clockwork precision. Every night at 3:17 a.m., the beacon would activate for exactly 30 minutes. Marcus witnessed it directly, feeling the heat from the powerful LEDs when he climbed to the lamp room, seeing the beam cut through fog and rain. But no camera, no recording device, no photograph could capture it. The phenomenon was becoming an obsession. Marcus found himself staying awake until 3:17 a.m. every night, watching the impossible spectacle. During the day, he researched the lighthouse's history, searching for any explanation. Beacon Point Light had been the site of tragedy in its operational years. In 1987, lighthouse keeper David Morrison had been found dead at the base of the tower during a severe storm. The official report listed the cause as accidental fall, but local rumors suggested suicide. Morrison had been struggling with depression after his wife left him, unable to cope with the isolation of lighthouse duty. In 1994, Keeper James Holloway disappeared during Hurricane Bob. His body was never found, though debris from the lighthouse suggested he had been swept away while attempting to maintain the beacon during the storm. Most recently, in 2019, the final keeper before automation, Robert Chensera's brother, had suffered a severe mental breakdown. He was found by maintenance crews, ranting about lights that shouldn't exist and signals from dead waters. Robert had been committed to a psychiatric facility and had never spoken coherently about his experiences at Beacon Point. As Marcus read these accounts, he began to understand that he was not the first person to witness inexplicable phenomena at the lighthouse. The pattern of mysterious lights and psychological disturbance stretched back decades, but understanding the history didn't explain the mechanism. How could a lighthouse with no power source continue operating? And why did it only activate at 3:17 a.m.? By the end of October, Marcus had witnessed the phantom beacon 27 times. Each occurrence followed the identical pattern: activation at 3:17 a.m., 30 minutes of normal operation, then complete darkness. The regularity was unnerving, as if the lighthouse was following some supernatural schedule. The isolation was beginning to affect him. Marcus found himself talking aloud during the day, holding conversations with the empty lighthouse as if it were a living entity. He had started referring to the beacon as she, and caught himself listening for responses that never came. His sleep schedule had completely inverted. He would stay awake until 4:00 a.m. watching the beacon, then sleep until noon. The lack of normal daylight exposure and social contact was taking its toll on his mental state. When he called Director Chen with his weekly reports, she grew increasingly concerned. "Marcus, I think you should come back to Portland for a few days. You sound exhausted." "I can't leave now, Sarah. I'm starting to understand the pattern. The beacon isn't random, it's trying to communicate something." "Lighthouses don't communicate, Marcus. They're mechanical devices. This one is different. The timing, the duration, the intensity variations, there's intelligence behind it." Sarah's voice carried a note of alarm. "Intelligence? Marcus, you're talking about a decommissioned lighthouse like it's alive." "I know how it sounds, but I've been documenting everything. The beacon operates for exactly 30 minutes every night, but the intensity isn't constant. It varies in what looks like a pattern: short flashes, long beams, different brightness levels. It's almost like..." "Like what?" "Like Morse code." The line was quiet for several seconds. "Marcus, I'm sending someone to relieve you. This assignment has gone on long enough." "No. If you send someone else, they'll just dismiss what's happening here. I'm the only one who understands." "Understands what?" Marcus paused, realizing how his words sounded. "I need more time to document the phenomenon properly. Give me 2 more weeks." After much persuasion, Sarah agreed to extend his assignment until mid-November. But Marcus could hear the concern in her voice. She was treating him like Robert Chen, another lighthouse keeper who had succumbed to isolation and delusion. That night, Marcus positioned himself in the lamp room with a notebook, ready to record the beacon's intensity variations. At 3:17 a.m., the light blazed to life around him. Standing inside the lamp room while the beacon operated was overwhelming. The LED array generated intense heat and blinding light that made direct observation nearly impossible. But Marcus forced himself to watch, squinting through the glare and trying to detect patterns in the beam's intensity. As the lighthouse rotation brought the beam around every 4 seconds, he began to notice variations. Some sweeps were brighter than others. Some seemed to pause slightly longer on specific directions. Over the 30-minute operational period, Marcus recorded what appeared to be a complex sequence of intensity changes and directional pauses. When he reviewed his notes the next morning, the pattern seemed random, But there were repetitions, certain sequences that appeared multiple times within the 30-minute window. For the next week, Marcus recorded the beacon's variations every night. Gradually, a pattern began to emerge. The intensity changes weren't random, they followed a specific sequence that repeated with slight variations. It was almost like a message being broadcast repeatedly, with minor modifications each night. Using his laptop computer, Marcus began analyzing the sequences mathematically. He converted the intensity variations to numerical values and looked for repeating patterns. What he discovered chilled him to the bone. The sequences matched Morse code patterns, but not modern international Morse code, an older variant used by maritime services in the early 20th century. Marcus spent hours with historical signal references, slowly translating the beacon's nightly transmissions. The first message he decoded was simple: "Keeper, still, here." The second night sequence translated to "Light, must, continue." By November 3rd, Marcus had decoded over a week's worth of messages. They all carried variations of the same theme. Something was maintaining the lighthouse beacon. Something that identified itself as a keeper, and it was determined to continue the light's operation regardless of official decommissioning. But the messages were becoming more complex, more personal. On November 4th, the decoded sequence read, "Marcus, we see you." Marcus stared at the translation in shock. The entity operating the beacon knew his name. It was aware of his presence and his efforts to understand the phenomena. Somehow, it was watching him. That realization fundamentally changed Marcus's perception of his situation. He was not merely observing mysterious phenomena. He was communicating with something intelligent, something that had been waiting for someone to understand its signals. The next night, Marcus prepared his own message. Using a high-powered flashlight, he positioned himself on the rocky shore where the beacon could clearly see him. At 3:17 a.m., when the phantom light blazed to life, Marcus began signaling back using Morse code. His message was simple: "Who are you?" For the first time since his arrival at Beacon Point, the beacon's behavior changed. Instead of its normal steady rotation, the beam paused directly on Marcus's position. For nearly 10 minutes, the brilliant light held him in its glare while he stood on the rocky shore, unable to move or look away. Then the beam resumed its rotation, but the intensity patterns had changed. The new message took Marcus hours to decode. David, Morrison, James, Holloway, Robert, Chen, we are the keepers. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. The entity was identifying itself using the names of previous lighthouse keepers, men who had died or disappeared at Beacon Point. David Morrison, who fell from the tower in 1987. James Holloway, who vanished during Hurricane Bob. Robert Chen, who had suffered a mental breakdown and was committed to psychiatric care. The phantom beacon was being operated by the dead. Marcus spent the following day researching the 3 men whose names had appeared in the beacon's message. What he discovered painted a disturbing picture of Beacon Point Light's history with its keepers. David Morrison had indeed died in 1987, but the official report contained inconsistencies. The weather records showed no severe storms on the night of his death, contradicting the official explanation that he fell while conducting storm-related maintenance. Witness statements from the Coast Guard crew who found his body mentioned that Morrison appeared to have been dead for several days, despite being discovered only hours after he failed to report for his radio check. James Holloway's disappearance during Hurricane Bob was equally mysterious. Search and rescue teams found no trace of him despite extensive efforts. His personal belongings remained undisturbed in the keeper's quarters, including foul weather gear he would have worn if attempting exterior maintenance. Most strangely, lighthouse maintenance logs showed that the beacon operated normally throughout the hurricane. even though Holloway was missing and presumed dead. Robert Chen's breakdown had been sudden and complete. According to his psychiatric evaluation reports, which Marcus obtained through Maritime Authority records, Robert claimed that the previous keepers never left, and that they showed him how to keep the light burning forever. He had been found in the lamp room during a routine inspection, catatonic and unresponsive, surrounded by what appeared to be hand-drawn charts and diagrams that made no sense to investigators. The pattern was clear. Beacon Point Light had claimed 3 keepers across 3 decades, and each disappearance or death involved unexplained circumstances and mentions of phantom lights or ongoing beacon operation. Marcus was dealing with something that had been accumulating power and intelligence for over 30 years. That evening, he prepared for what he expected would be his most important communication yet. He set up multiple recording devices not to capture the phantom beacon, which he knew was impossible, but to record his own responses and translations. If something happened to him, he wanted evidence of his discoveries. At 3:17 a.m., the beacon blazed to life with unusual intensity. The beam seemed brighter than previous nights, casting harsh shadows across the landscape. Marcus positioned himself with his flashlight and began transmitting his prepared message. "What do you want?" The response was immediate and terrifying. Instead of the beacon's normal rotation, the light began rapidly flashing in complex patterns, transmitting far more information than Marcus could process in real time. The intensity was overwhelming, forcing him to shield his eyes as the messages poured down from the lamp room. When the 30-minute operational period ended, Marcus had filled 12 pages with recorded light patterns. It took him until dawn to decode the complete message. The light must never die. Beacon Point has guided ships for 100 years. Automated systems fail. Human keepers abandon their posts. But we remain. We maintain the light. We will teach you, as we taught the others. Join us, Marcus. Become a keeper. The light needs you. Marcus stared at the decoded message with growing horror. The entities weren't just operating the phantom beacon, they were recruiting. They had taught Morrison, Holloway, and Chen, and now they wanted to teach him. The mental breakdown, disappearances, and death of the previous keepers weren't coincidences, they were the result of prolonged contact with whatever was maintaining the lighthouse. He tried calling Director Chen, but his cell phone showed no signal. The phone had worked perfectly for weeks, but now displayed only empty bars. Marcus checked the landline connection in the keeper's quarters, also dead. His radio equipment produced only static. The entities had cut him off from outside contact. As the day progressed, Marcus became aware of changes in his environment. Objects in the keeper's quarters were slightly displaced from where he'd left them. His research notes had been disturbed, with certain pages bookmarked or highlighted by an unknown hand. Most unsettling, his own handwriting in the maintenance logbook had been altered. Entries he remembered making now contained different words, as if someone was editing his records. By evening, Marcus realized he was no longer alone in the lighthouse. He could hear footsteps in the upper levels of the tower, the sound of doors opening and closing, and muffled voices conducting conversations just beyond his ability to understand. When he investigated these sounds, he found nothing but the sensations persisted. The entities were making their presence known. At 3:17 a.m., Marcus positioned himself in the lamp room, determined to confront whatever was operating the beacon directly. As the light blazed to life around him, he was nearly blinded by its intensity. But through the glare, he began to see shapes moving within the lamp room, translucent figures that seemed to be composed of the light itself. 3 figures became distinct as Marcus's eyes adjusted to the overwhelming brightness. They appeared as lighthouse keepers in work clothes from different eras, one in 1980s maritime gear, one in 1990s foul weather clothing, and one in modern lighthouse maintenance attire. David Morrison, James Holloway and Robert Chen. The figures gestured for Marcus to approach the beacon control panel. Through the brilliant light, he could see that the controls were now active, displaying readings and switches that glowed with the same ethereal radiance as the spectral keepers. The dead men pointed to specific controls, indicating settings and adjustments that Marcus should make. They were teaching him to operate the phantom beacon. Marcus tried to resist, backing away from the controls, but found his movement restricted. The light itself seemed to hold him in place, drawing him inexorably toward the beacon apparatus. His hands moved independently of his will, reaching for the controls as the spectral keepers guided his actions. As Marcus touched the first control switch, he felt a shock of connection that sent visions flooding through his mind. He saw the lighthouse's 100-year history, decades of keepers maintaining the beacon, ships safely guided past the rocky coastline, lives saved by the faithful light. But he also saw the gradual mechanization, the replacement of human dedication with automated systems, and finally, the decommissioning that left the lighthouse dark and abandoned. The spectral keepers showed him ships that had been wrecked since the beacon was decommissioned, vessels that would have been saved if the light had been operational. They showed him the gap in maritime safety that Beacon Point's darkness had created, and the continuing need for a beacon to guide ships safely along this treacherous coastline. Their cause seemed noble, even necessary. Marcus began to understand why the previous keepers had accepted their fate. They were serving a purpose greater than themselves, maintaining a light that saved lives even after death. But as the visions continued, Marcus saw the price of joining the spectral keepers. Morrison, Holloway, and Chen had not simply died or disappeared. They had been absorbed into the lighthouse itself, their life force converted into the energy that powered the phantom beacon. They existed now as extensions of the lighthouse, forever bound to maintain its light. If Marcus accepted their offer, he would become the fourth keeper in their ethereal crew. His living energy added to their supernatural power. The lighthouse would grow stronger with each keeper, it claimed, its beacon brighter and more persistent. The choice was presented to him with stark clarity. Join the spectral keepers willingly and help maintain the beacon that saved lives, or resist and face the same fate as the others but without the comfort of voluntary service. Marcus realized he was trapped. The entities would not allow him to leave Beacon Point with knowledge of their existence. He could join them willingly, or they would eventually claim him by force. Either way, he would become part of the lighthouse's supernatural crew. As the spectral figures waited for his decision, Marcus understood that Director Chen would soon send another maintenance worker to check on his prolonged absence. That person would find the lighthouse apparently abandoned, with no trace of Marcus except perhaps some disturbing entries in the logbook. They would complete their inspection and leave, never suspecting that Beacon Point Light now had 4 spectral keepers maintaining its phantom beacon. And in a few years, when that new person inevitably returned for routine maintenance, the cycle would begin again. Marcus made his choice at 3:47 a.m. on November 8th, 2025. When Director Chen received no response to her calls for 3 consecutive days, she dispatched Tom Richards to check on the lighthouse inspection. Tom arrived at Beacon Point on November 12th, expecting to find Marcus either sick or dealing with equipment problems. The keeper's quarters were empty but undisturbed. Marcus's personal belongings remained in place, his laptop computer still open to lighthouse maintenance records. The bed appeared slept in recently, and a half-finished cup of coffee sat on the desk, still faintly warm. Tom found Marcus's inspection logbook open to the final entry, dated November 7th. Beacon Point Light remains structurally sound and suitable for historical preservation. All electrical systems confirmed disconnected. No power sources remain active. The lighthouse beacon has not operated since decommissioning in June. Recommend transfer to Historical Society for museum purposes. This concludes my assignment. The entry was written in Marcus's neat handwriting, but Tom noticed something odd about the ink. In certain light, the words seemed to shimmer slightly, as if written with luminescent paint rather than ordinary ink. Tom completed a thorough inspection of the lighthouse and found no trace of Marcus. His vehicle was missing from the site, and a call to the local police confirmed that the car had been found abandoned at a rest stop halfway to Portland. Keys still in the ignition. Marcus Delacroix had simply vanished. The official report listed Marcus as missing under suspicious circumstances. The lighthouse was sealed and marked for historical transfer. Within 6 months, Beacon Point Light became a museum operated by the Maine Maritime Heritage Foundation. But the overnight security guards at the museum began reporting unusual phenomena within weeks of opening. Every night at 3:17 a.m., they observed a brilliant light emanating from the sealed lamp room. The light operated for exactly 30 minutes, sweeping across the ocean in perfect rotation patterns. The Foundation's board initially dismissed these reports as imagination or equipment malfunction. Security cameras showed no evidence of illumination during the reported times. But when multiple guards quit after witnessing the phantom beacon, the Foundation was forced to investigate. They brought in electrical contractors to verify that the lighthouse had no power source. They installed additional monitoring equipment to document any unusual activity. They even consulted with paranormal investigators, who confirmed high levels of electromagnetic activity centered on the lamp room. Nothing explained the nightly activation of a beacon that could not possibly operate. The Foundation eventually stopped trying to explain the phenomenon and began marketing it as part of the lighthouse's historical charm. Ghost tours were added to the regular museum offerings, with guides telling sanitized versions of the lighthouse keepers who had dedicated their lives to maintaining the beacon. Tourists loved the stories, and the phantom beacon became Beacon Point Light's primary attraction. Visitors would gather on the rocky shore every night at 3:17 a.m., hoping to witness the mysterious light. Most saw nothing unusual, but their cameras and recording devices captured only darkness. However, sensitive individuals occasionally reported seeing figures moving within the lamp room during the beacon's operation. They described 4 men in lighthouse keeper uniforms, working together to maintain the massive beacon apparatus. The figures appeared to be from different time periods, as if representing decades of dedicated service. Local maritime authorities quietly acknowledged that ships passing Beacon Point continued to receive guidance from the lighthouse beacon, despite its official decommissioned status. Several vessel captains reported that the light had helped them navigate safely through dangerous waters during storms when modern GPS systems had failed. The Coast Guard stopped investigating these reports after confirming that no lives had been lost to shipwreck in the Beacon Point area since the Phantom Beacon began operating. Whatever was maintaining the light was serving its intended purpose, guiding ships safely past the rocky coastline. Sarah Chen never received a satisfactory explanation for her brother Robert's breakdown or Marcus Delacroix's disappearance. She retired from the Maritime Authority in 2026 and moved to California, unable to cope with the memories of what happened at Beacon Point Light. But on clear nights, when she looked out at the Pacific Ocean from her new home, Sarah sometimes saw distant lights that shouldn't exist. Beacons operating from decommissioned lighthouses, maintained by keepers who refused to abandon their posts, even in death. She never investigated these sightings. Some mysteries were better left undisturbed. Today, Beacon Point Light continues to operate as a museum during daylight hours. The Phantom Beacon activates every night at 3:17 a.m., maintaining its 30-minute schedule with clockwork precision. 4 spectral keepers tend the light, adding their combined dedication to a purpose that transcends death. The lighthouse is always looking for new keepers. The light must never die. If you've enjoyed this journey into a place where the past refuses to stay buried, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss another true horror story. The next light in the darkness is waiting. Will you answer its call?